Goo! Hello, welcome to GBR 2 vs 2. The map is Turtle Rock. It's Albert, Einstein and Granty both playing as Night Elf, and Captain Crunch playing as Human and Tank as Random. Let's see what Tank got. Tank got himself a bit of Night Elf then. So it's Human and Night Elf versus Night Elf and Night Elf. It's Altar of Elders, so no Tavern Hero for Tank, unless he chooses to go that way later on in the game. And Captain Crunch is going to want a tight base with the Human and all, isn't it? We'll see whether he actually goes through with that. And Albert Einstein, he's still got his altar. Granted, I reckon what they're obviously feeding each other. There's some sort of lame strat or something they said they were going to do. So we're going to see that follow through basically. But I assume there's going to be feeding. Oh, Granty's fast teching, so that's an interesting move. Mass Fairy Dragons perhaps. Mass something, some sort of tier 2. We shall see what that moves into. But if Captain Crunch or Tank, preferably Tank, just scouts with the Wisp, unlikely he might scout it anyway in the first place, but if he does, he's going to come across Albert first, most likely, and Albert might be able to dispatch of the Wisp before it actually gets towards Granty's base. But we do want to see a scout, since that's obviously always important to see what your enemy is doing. So if you don't scout, you can lose because of it, and this might be proof of that very fact. So there you go, you've learned something already today. Scout. If you're Night Elf have the best scouting capabilities because of Wisps being able to hide onto trees and gather lumber whilst they're there, so they don't actually have to be inside their own base. You can have a Wisp over here on the tree and it's getting you lumber just the same as it would be in your own base. Not to mention that Wisps are the fastest unit when it comes to worker units. They're faster than peons, peasants or acolytes. So they're very effective, and they can also be used offensively to annoy enemies with their detonate ability. So if there's a Farseer creeping or an Archmage, you know, the Wisps, if the Night Elf player feels necessary, then maybe they might want to detonate the Wisp just to slow down their opponent's creeping. Hunter's Hall, so Tanks going Hunts. Footies Mountain King for Captain Crunch. Not sure where they go from there. Yeah, double Warden. So it does look like Granty has built up into a hero himself. He's chosen not to go for a neutral hero, despite this build actually allowing it, because by the time he got that altar up, he could have actually got a hero from the tavern pretty much as soon as it was available. Double Warden will be quite nice against Keeper of the Grove. Not the strongest hero for dealing with that kind of harass. Albert hasn't teched yet. Doesn't look like he's making any more Wisps. I know what they're doing. And now I know what they're doing. It's only Granty teching up that's somewhat made me suspicious, but they're basically going for mass Moonwells and double Warden strategy, which is pretty effective. On some maps more than others. I believe the map Tyrannus Stand is one of the best maps you can do it on because of the fact that the Warden can blink over large distances, really. Because of the rivers blocking off the middle bit, the Warden can actually blink over that and save herself a lot of time. Meanwhile, we have Captain Crunch, who's spotted something irregular inside of Granty's base, a tier 2 Tree of Life, or Tree of Ages, should I say. And Captain Crunch, the thing is with both the Wardens here, Captain Crunch will not be able to do anything. His best bet is to simply run. He's never going to benefit from staying in this fight whatsoever, because Wardens will just be able to break that down. He needs many more units before he can really take that on comfortably. So there's just no point staying there. Tank should be making his way because he's realised something is wrong and it's time to punish them for it. Wardens are going to maybe get a little bit of cheeky experience here. There is another Stormbolt in a moment, which I assume is going to be used, but not necessary just yet, because that Footman is doing a fantastic job of passively blocking one of those Wardens, and now the Mountain King's doing the same. Keeper of the Grove has joined in the fight here, so now it might be a bit more adequate to turn around and fight. But the good news is at least this way Albert and Granty are blowing all of their mana and losing a bit of health, which means that when they do go back and soak up on the Moonwells, which they will be able to do, they're going to use up that Moonwell juice, and that works for them, but at the same time it also works
forces are under attack
for Tank and Captain Crunch, because they want that Moonwell juice to be as low as possible. And I'm surprised that Granty lost his hero there. Either he messed up or something. He was going to block it, blame it on lag. I don't know. But that was pretty bad. But we've got Albert's building more stuff, but also inside of Granty's base, and we've got Druids of the Talon. So they're not doing the strict strategy where you're not allowed any units whatsoever, not even mercenaries. They are somewhat, I wouldn't say cheating, it's just part of what they're trying to do, and they're moving on to Druid of the Talon, and that could be useful. Not the most fantastic units, but that's what would make it more interesting if they could actually win with them. So Captain Crunch, are they going to creep out this spot? They've got a few units, they can definitely do it. It will grant them a nice item perhaps, and definitely a useful sentry ward. So let's see what does drop from Mr. Ogre Magi. And it is a Talisman of Evasion. That's actually pretty damn useful for either of the heroes against a Warden especially. Naga Sea Bitch coming out onto the fray. Might want to pick up that item. Don't want to really leave that hanging on any longer than it needs to. Oh wow, that is a troubled Warden. And it's level 1, so there's no blink. TP is used, and it looks like Tank and Captain Crunch might be pushing out here, which is what we want to see. They're teching up, so they're still proceeding on that level, going for tier 2. But at the same time, they've still got enough units to actually push and make an offensive attack. Meanwhile, Granty only has a couple of Druid of the Talons at the moment. Throwing down some Fairy Fire, which is always going to be useful. -4 armor. Well, technically, what would you say, -4? I swear it used to be -5, but I'm probably wrong. It is just -4 then. Oh, down goes Albert's Warden. This is not really what they want, because the whole strategy is about keeping their Wardens alive so that they can soak up the experience of picking off units one by one. But it does look like they are somewhat not ready for this. This may have been the wrong choice of map, simply because it's quite small to some degree. There's a fair distance between the opposite sides, but on the same level, it's still kind of small, you know? And you kind of want a decent bit of distance between your opponent, because if they rush like this, it's not even a rush here. This is just an offensive attack aimed around the tier 2 mark with tier 1 units. Oh, down goes another Stormbolt, and there'll be one more. Those footies are going to give a nice bit of experience unless the Ancient of Wind takes them out. So this level 1 Warden is still level 1. And that was Panda time. So it looks like Granty's switching it up a bit and going second. I don't know whether he intended to go Panda all along, but I think he needs it. Is there going to be a blink? I think there might be a blink, at least researched.
Player's forces are under attack.
And the Fairy Fire being useful. Albert's also got himself a Panda second, so I don't know whether they decided to do this on the fly. Double Arcane Sanctum. There's still a bit of mana on Granty's hero, so he could still prove quite a pest to these footies at the very least. Pick off another couple of footies, especially with the Panda following in tow. Breath of Fire probably going to be used very shortly afterwards, and a couple of Druids of the Talon. So actually, the roles are reversed now, and it looks like Granty's now pushing ahead. But Tank isn't too far away. I can see him on the minimap making his way, and he's going to be kind of annoying because he's got that Keeper of the Grove. He's got very annoying controlling heroes. They're both incredibly weak, and if focused in the correct manner, they can go down very fast. But if they're just hanging in the background, they're going to be a real pain with the Frost Arrows and the Entangle. There's a decent chunk of Huntresses as well, sitting on 1-0. And yes, Dryads. I assumed it was Dryads coming into the fray. So there's a nice little annoying Night Elf army there. That's going to prove a bit of a pest for Albert and Granty. Ooh, Chimera Roosts. And Dryads for Albert. Could work, but they'd have to drag the game out long enough to get a decent chunk of Chimeras. Oh, he's going for a surround there, almost there, Tank. He's done enough there to keep that Panda in trouble. They're going to switch over the DPS to Albert, and he's going to go back to base, soak up those Moonwells over here. Okay, TP'd up that way to meet up with Granty, I suppose, but there's less Moonwells this way. Tank is now moving into Albert's base, which is largely undefended. He might be able to take down an Ancient of Law if he religiously sticks to it. Almost definitely. But I don't know whether he'll get the other one by the time that Granty and Albert can get back in time to try and distract their foes. Yeah, Wisp's almost coming out there for Albert, but then moving back. It looks like there's a decent army here, really, for Tank and Captain Crunch. Nice, safe combination. Shims aren't much of a threat at this moment, even in small numbers. There's still not much of a threat. Like I say, you have to have 3 to 4 shims for them to be really a problem, and for you to have to run back to your base and go, oh no, I cannot stay here and fight. But meanwhile, we've got Spellbreakers, just brilliant, really units. You can't go wrong with Spellbreakers. And the heroes from Albert and Granty are just dropping left, right and centre. Look at that. Look at the chat. It's like all their heroes have gone down simply because of the control that the Captain Crunch and Tank 2 team have. With the Mountain King, solid freaking hero control right there with the Storm Bolts, Storm Bolts, Storm Bolts. Level 2 Storm Bolts at that, so it's going to pack a bit of a punch. And the Entangle and the Frost Arrows, it's just very good. Now, I think the damage has been done. If Granty and Albert could have, I don't know, been in the middle of the map having this fight and not lost necessarily all of their heroes, they might have been able to have lost a couple of heroes just to sort of buy themselves some time. But when you're sitting inside your base and you've lost all your heroes and it's been attacked, siege to some degree, because there's so many offensive units, it may as well be siege, because there's going to be a lot of damage going down on those buildings. It's not some light touch, believe me. Once all these Spellbreakers and Huntresses get focused on those buildings, they'll go down quickly enough. So Albert and Granty really needed to buy themselves just a little bit more time. I'm not saying there was necessarily any particular way to do it, but that's kind of what they needed. And I don't think they've got the time really to build up a sufficient army to counter this. So actually it's a really good job from Tank and Captain Crunch, because I went into this thinking that Albert and Granty were going to win quite easily. And it looks like I'm pretty wrong, to be honest. There's a lot of Moonwells here. It's going to grant a lot of 30 kills, but that's about it. Hunts have got a decent chunk of health. Dryads aren't going to be affected by these spells like Fock or Breath of Fire. And Spellbreakers, like I say, are beautiful, very, very safe units. Really, there's no reason not to build Spellbreakers as a human for the most part, because they're always useful. And at the very, very least, they're anti-heroes to some degree, because they can also drain mana off the heroes. So they're useful in pretty much every degree. You know, it's just no reason not to have Spellbreakers if you have Arcane Sanctums. Obviously, if you're going for like some sort of workshop Knight build or Griffins, and yeah, you know, I'm not going to say, hey, why hasn't he got Spellbreakers? What's going on? But if you've got Arcane Sanctums, throw in a couple of Spellbreakers. They're great. They're just so good against Night Elf as well because of the medium armor. There's not many Night Elf units that basically do extra damage to Spellbreakers. Apart from Giants, which aren't very practical. Ah, here come the Shims. 4 Shims, that's a good chunk, to be honest. That could definitely at least repel the forces of Tank and Captain Crunch, but they haven't really lost that much. They've done a lot of damage to Albert's base, granted, but it's not definitely down. Unfortunately, Tank, did he not manage to get back? Oh, he didn't have a TP, fair enough. So he's lost a bit more than he wanted to, but even then it's still not that much. In fact, it almost would have done them a favour if they actually lost more Huntresses, because that would just mean you can pump out more Dryads and stay underneath the food cap. Because Dryads are going to easily counter pretty much everything that these Night Elf boys have, Granty and Albert. The Dryads, Druids of the Talon, Chimeras, tomato, either way you say it, it's right. And yeah, I mean, the Dryads would just be a perfect choice, good against the heroes as well, but they need a huge chunk of them. Maybe now would be a good time for Captain Crunch. It's only because he's tight on resources, otherwise he could go mash gyros or something like that. Quite humorous, would be very effective against Night Elf, even though there is a panda, but he's kind of low level. Always TPing in there, good chunk of Spellbreakers. They've just got to basically survive. Use the heroes with range and the Dryads to focus down the Shims, whilst the rest of the Spellbreakers, which there are many of them, and look at them go, because they're draining the additional mana off the heroes, basically making the Panda and the Warden relatively useless. So there's only really these Dryads to worry about. The Shims aren't that big a deal. Priests are coming in. They're going to be a little bit squishy though, the Shims managed to get on them, which I think they are going to focus them, but then maybe swapping to the Mountain King, who hasn't actually got many places to run to, so he's actually probably going to die in a moment. Almost definitely. No, maybe not. He's just sort of sneaks around there, buying himself any time he could possibly get, whilst Tank pushes slightly further ahead with those Dryads, which in turn makes the Shim return to his base. Oh, wow. Yep, I think Albert and Granty did a good job there trying to push ahead. That's all they could do, but they really needed the Mountain King kill because that would have given them a hell of a lot of experience. He was level 4 at the time, I think, but even then a level 4 hero is still going to be nice experience, which you are going to want to have on your heroes to stop them from dying all the time, which is currently happening because Granty's got a level 3 Warden and there's a level 2 Warden for Albert, so they're nowhere near as strong as they need to be right now. They need to be sitting at the level 4, level 5 mark, and even then they're not that useful because of the fact that Tank and Captain Crunch have correctly chosen spell immune units to have in their unit composition, which I cannot falter that thinking whatsoever because that is exactly the right way to play this. Additional creeping done here by Tank and Captain Crunch coming up from the rear, going to pick up some more items and additionally give themselves a bit of extra cash, obviously, from killing the creeps. And they grant themselves a bit of extra control if they can pick up the Rune of the Watcher. So they've got the one over here and the one over here. So they can see pretty much anything that's going to go down. There's a little wisp over here from Albert by the red creep camp. And it looks like Granty and Albert are also choosing to creep, which is a good choice because you can't be sitting there, especially with their heroes so weak. The shims are starting to build up a bit more. 4 shims, any more coming out? There is another one, another 2 coming out. So yeah, the shims are nasty. Dryads are good against them, very, very good against them, obviously, but there's something with shims, and I experienced this a lot in 4 vs 4, where they can really turn the tide of battle. Despite, even if you have mass tanks and stuff like that, sometimes if they've got such a huge amount of shims, it's just the focus damage and the fact that they can fly and be maneuverable. They're slow, but they're still maneuverable. It allows them to pretty much get away with more than they should do. So if Granty can ever get to the stage where he's got the critical mass of shims that he can control his opponents despite what counters to shims they have, then he's pretty much going to take home the win. But this is not what they want to see right now, as Captain Crunch pushing inside of a very, very vulnerable base from Albert. He could choose to go for the Tree of Ages, but probably going to assume that there might be some sort of return from either player on that team. And he was going to go for the Moon Wells, but he's now switching round, deciding to deal with Albert, attacking from behind. I probably would have stayed on the Moon Wells a little bit longer if I could, but then again, it's not such a bad move because Granty has TP'd in, and he'd want to make sure he can be kind of far away from the base enough. Is that a giant? How did that go down so damn quick? I missed that. There's a giant, and somehow that went down super fast. I don't think the shims managed to finish that off. They must have got caught by a creep or something. I don't know what was going on there. The Spellbreaker's pretty much chasing a hero right now, not being much use. Captain Crunch got anti-magic shield, but it's not going to survive forever. And it looks like they are quite focused on trying to bring down that Mountain King. They're running away for now, but they'll probably come back for him when they can get another shot. There is still a sizable army for Captain Crunch and Tank. So we got 59 food for Tanky and 56 food for Captain Crunch, just slightly over the food cap there, but they've got enough resources to keep going. Albert sitting on 35 food, and I think there was another shim going down or something like that. So Albert's, yeah, he's still got his 35 food, and Granty's sitting on 50. Got a decent chunk of shims, but it's just... It is a decent chunk of shims. I think they can kind of ignore the Dryads to some extent if they can fly back the weak ones over the trees and try to bring down the heroes, but it's not easy to chase down the heroes with shims when basically the heroes are so fast and shims are so slow. Albert's base is a goner by the looks of it. All those wisps are pretty much done. Ah, okay. That makes more sense. That makes weird sense because I didn't even predict that. I didn't even see that one coming, but Albert going giants, and that was Albert's giant dying, because that makes more sense, because it didn't really make sense to me how Tank lost a giant to what Granty and Albert had at that time over this side. And I just saw a giant corpse and I was like, weird. But of course Albert could have made them, and he did, so that's kind of useful actually. But is it going to fool Tank, really? Only 2 giants, not bad. You can't expect to have too many more than that, really, in the situation that they're currently in. But it's just going to buy Granty probably an extra 3 to 4 seconds, and that's if Tank decides to switch his DPS back onto the shims the moment he can. It's only really going to buy him 3 to 4 seconds of immunity for the shims, and even some hippos here are going to put some extra threat onto the shims and just be a nuisance, pecking away at the shims' feathers. So we've got this focus on the Mountain King again. Hawks are in the fray now, so again this is a nice decent amount of shims, but they're basically getting countered quite heavily at this point. This is it, you've got to go with the shims now or never. You've got nothing else to lose at this point. Giants are in the fray, they're in the middle, they're ready to taunt away. Shim DPS now focusing onto the Keep of the Grove, who's pretty beefy at this point because he's got Ring of Protection +3 and a Gauntlet of Strength, so he's not exactly going down as fast as he may have normally done, especially the fact that since he's level 5, Shims are falling to pieces, Hippos are going to town, Dryads are still focusing down on those Shims. Granted, Panda is now taking an invulnerability pot, but when he comes out, he's got a lot of mana, but he's got very little health to keep himself alive. So very good job here from Captain Crunch, who's sitting on a level 7 Mountain King, and Tank, who's got level 4 Naga Sea Bitch, and retreating level 5 Keep of the Grove, who's soon to be level 6. With Tranquility, there's going to be absolutely nothing that can stop these boys. And Granty leaves. Shortly Albert should leave as well, and that's GG. Or should I say BG, apparently, according to Albert. I think that's fair game, to be honest. They played the strategy, they really wanted to do it. They thought they were going to win, and it backfired on them. So there you go, it's just the way it goes. Granty still nabbed the most gold, because no expansions were used. Not too much feeding. A little bit. 2,700 is a decent proportion, but not overly feeding, at least in this 2 versus 2 game. Okay, thanks for watching. Let's just see how many hero kills. A decent chunk of hero kills, which again just, you know, at this point they basically won it anyway, Tank and Captain Crunch. But even before that point, they would have had like 4 hero kills and probably 3. You know, that's still a decent chunk of extra experience they are granting themselves, because they're denying the heroes from existing on the enemy team, denying the heroes because they don't exist, because they're dead, to do any damage, and they're soaking up all that experience and then getting stronger in return. So that's very well played. Good job from that team. Well done. Right, please subscribe, like and comment. I'll see you later.